Congratulations to Sean Hickey, who's picked the worst place to put the camera possible. We might even get shut down. We've already had someone come over.
They've already tried.
We thought that we'd upgrade ourselves. Well, Sean did, from the bins and the water cooler.
And the toilets.
And we've taken the main thoroughfare. Keir Starmer's speech has just ended. There's going to be thousands of people walking out this door behind us. And see how long we can go for. What did you make of it?
I thought it was, change was the theme. There were lots of people in hats that said change as well. You might see.
Can I tell you about some of those hats?
Yeah, please.
There are a couple of people walking around selling the hats.
Really?
Yeah, they're £8 a go. I think they're just like a couple of plucky entrepreneurs.
Oh, really? It's not. I thought it was Official Labour.
So there's official Labour merch, but there's also sort of this bootleg group who are walking around selling them for £8 a go, which I think is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So as you can see, it's really filling up now. This is going to get so busy.
But I think the chat of change kind of came in two parts. At the beginning, he was talking about how he changed the Labour Party with reference to Brighton 3 years ago, where he was talking about that being the turning of the tide for the party. He's speaking about that was when they made a strong stand with NATO and on Ukraine, and that it was the beginning of them rooting out anti-Semitism from the party as well, which I think, interestingly, I've been speaking to a lot of young Labour members, and the amount of young Labour members who mention Keir Starmer's ability to root out anti-Semitism from the Labour Party as a big reason for their support, not just of Starmer, but also a lot of them joining or rejoining the Labour Party was because of that effort. And then I think there was also the second half of the speech was change moving forward. You want to talk about some of that change?
So it was the change that he's established, and that word was threaded the entire way through the speech. He talked about the weak fantasy of populism, which is now water off a duck's back. He talked about
mere glitter off a shirt cuff, as he said as well.
Do you know, I can't even hear you. What did you say?
He said water off a duck's back or glitter off a shirt cuff.
Glitter off a shirt cuff as well, didn't he? Which was in reference. Yeah, sure. Which was in reference to the protest last year where someone jumped up on stage and threw glitter over Keir Starmer. There wasn't any protest activity this year. He really accentuated this point about service. He was talking about our duty to British people. Mm-hmm. We do this together. Mm-hmm. He was talking about the politics of inclusion and working together toward a more prosperous economy.
Yeah.
I thought, that's rather interesting because the background of this, in the background, is this donations furore that is rolling on. And there's certainly still some frustration. I suppose there will be after that speech as well going forward, that a man who is very wealthy, a very wealthy lawyer, says that he needs to accept money to buy certain suits and clothes. At the same time, he's asking everyone else to tighten their bootstraps. It's quite a hard sell.
He also described it as a politics of renewal and said that Labour now, every decision we take together. And I wonder how he is saying that with the background of the winter fuel and everything that's happened over that, and also with the two-child benefit cap as well, which MPs were suspended from the party over.
Absolutely, because he talks about this being the party of opportunity. Just before the speech, we had, I believe his name was Matthew, who was on stage. He was talking about how he had been offered opportunity, and that's how he was able to go to university. You sort of wonder, how on earth do you create opportunity if you are taking away those sort of welfare benefits that assist people, that get people into education?
Keir Starmer was defending the unpopular decisions that he had to take, in obvious reference to winter fuel, and he hit out at the Tories' politics of easy answers, which I think plays into the kind of rhetoric we've seen from the Labour Party, which a lot of people have kind of labelled as quite doom and gloom rhetoric, even though he said this time round that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but did imply that it could be quite a long tunnel to get there. Did you find the tone optimistic?
It was actually the most relaxed I think we've seen Starmer in a good few years. He was cracking a number of jokes towards the end of the speech. He made a joke about how he'd visited this old rental home that he used to go to when he was a child. The owner let him look around the property, and then made a joke about if she'd known he was a politician, she would have kicked him down the stairs. I got a good laugh. It's a very relaxed little anecdote from him. We don't normally see him like that. It's optimistic in, they're very pleased with a number of announcements that they've made. He talked about how the politics of service has begun. He said they've gotten ahead with planning, reform, building, new solar and wind, cancelling Ofsted one word, I've forgotten the name of it, the Ofsted ratings, and gotten rid of no fault evictions. He also announced that Great British Energy, GB Energy, will be in SNP Heartlands. It will be right slap bang where Stephen Flynn is clinging on in Aberdeen.
I think this has been quite a poorly kept secret that GB Energy was going to be headquartered in Aberdeen. I mean, the BBC were reporting that back at the beginning of the month. I wonder how much it was fueled by the fact that Aberdeen is an SNP stronghold, and how much of it was to do with the fact that, there'll be they had a manifesto promise that was no new oil and gas licenses, so they'll have to replace those jobs in a just transition with GB Energy headquarters. But I wonder how that transition will work when you have North Sea oil workers, but GB Energy isn't an energy supplier. It's a publicly owned investment body funding new and existing clean power. So I wonder how exactly will those job losses translate?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like Port Talbot and the transition that's going on there. That transition from a blast furnace into an electric furnace. Labour have spoken at length about how they'd like to keep a lot of the jobs there, how they'd like it to be a slow transition. But at the end of the day, if you're shutting a blast furnace, those skills will be lost. There will be a number of people who will be put out of work.
I imagine, though.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Tracy.
Hi.
How are you?
Hello, lovely.
Do you want to jump in?
How are you doing? Great to see you. You look gorgeous as ever.
You look lovely too.
Thank you.
Were you inside?
Yes, on the front row.
What did you make of Keir's speech?
I was really excited by what he had to say. He started very measured. He came across as the person that I know, quite sort of open and self-depreciating, but also, being able to deliver a plan. And I think that's what the public really wanted to see. And the section about racism and the civil disobedience over the summer, actually, that was really strong. That if you are a racist, you're not welcome. We don't want people who want to divide our societies, and we will make sure you have no space and no oxygen. I thought that was a really good part of it. You could see that the conference just were on their feet and really saw that actually the future is much brighter.
And he was talking a lot about economic growth, which of course is a main driver of rooting out, division. And I mean, how has it been in your region? Have you noticed the politics of the far right? Have you noticed it increasing?
Well, look, I came into politics after the sitting MP was murdered by a white supremacist. So, of course, the far right is in existence. It lives and breathes in West Yorkshire. But we have to do everything in our power to make sure that there's no air for that sort of approach. But to your point about growth, of course, it's also about opportunity and making sure my growth plan that we were all as mayors tasked with to help inform the industrial strategy going forward, we are absolutely focusing on how we can put more money in people's pockets. So if that's about widening the eligibility for skills training, from the minimum wage to the real living wage, 7,000 more people have got access to free skills because that then means they can earn more and put more money in their pocket. Or if it's putting on courses for telecoms engineers, but making sure that the people who access those courses are those furthest away from the employment market, even people with a criminal record that might struggle to get into work, being able to give them that hope and optimism, working, of course, with the centre, but delivering on the ground as mayors do, as this is what is our bread and butter, to grow our economy, increase transport, bringing buses back under public control, mass transit, all of these things impact on people's ability to move about and see and take up opportunities, skills, jobs. So it's an exciting time to be a mayor, and you saw that yesterday the devolution revolution has started, but we heard that very clearly from Keir as well.
Yes, he did. He stressed during that speech about devolution. Yeah. Do you have any idea or time frame of how that might pan out in the coming years?
Yeah, but we are delivering our growth plans imminently, and then the industrial strategy, there will be a white paper, and then it will be coming into more detail. There'll obviously be the headlines about what it means, because it impacts on our community, because I know what skills we need, but what other skills are needed across the region, across the north, and so on. It's a really, it was great. I have to admit to having tears in my eyes in the creative industry section, because it's so true. We can't just talk about the one person that came from Batley Council Estate and ended up on Coronation Street. We have to say that every individual person I grew up with is of the same value and should have the same opportunities to fulfill their potential, whatever that is, and to live a life where they can afford to put food on the table, have a holiday, run a car, or do the things that they want to do. And that really chimed with me, that working class values of the Labour Party, supporting, serving working people, just was very powerful.
Is there a sense now that the working class are back on the agenda? Is that what you're feeling from this conference?
Absolutely, and there are more working class members of Parliament in Cabinet than ever before, more women than ever before. And certainly as somebody that grew up in social housing on free school meals, to see Bridget Phillipson, who had a very similar background. We're streeting. Angela Rayner. I mean, Angela's story is incredible, and I am so proud of her, and she's an inspiration to so many. But I do think that those values should and now do inform the Labour Party, and it is about that access to all of the good stuff in life that when you have those values that you can deliver.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
thank you so much,
Cheers,
Tracy. Can we start with your first impressions? Were you in the hall? Did you make the ballot?
I did just make the ballot in the end, yes. But I thought it was a really good speech, actually. Keir's strongest as leader yet. I thought it was personable, bold, but showed the steely resolve, I think, that people want to see from a government that's facing a lot of challenges. That's a real need to get going and turning things around.
There really did feel like that steely resolve you talk about, it was threaded right through the speech. We're talking about change. We're talking about a new politics, a new change Labour Party. Is that the sort of sense you get now?
Exactly that. We've inherited a situation that, to be honest, has been the result of successive governments not taking the big structural decisions needed to improve things for everyday people's lives. And while people are very tolerant and understanding of the dire inheritance they've got, they are fed up of politicians who aren't able to improve things for them and their family. We need to be bold in turning that around, and I think Keir today showed the resolve we're going to need to show over the next 5 years to start putting things right.
You had a very interesting couple of elections. You won the by-election against Nadine Dorries, and then you also unseated Bima Fulani as your boundaries had changed. What did you get from voters? What sort of sense? Was there was it an anti-Tory vote? Were they tired of the same old politics from those politicians?
I think it was a vote that was fed up. It was voters who felt let down by the previous government, but also desperate for the big changes they knew needed to happen to make things improve. Whether it was the cost of living pressures their family was facing, whether it was struggle seeing a doctor or dentist locally, or whether it was the changes that had happened to their town without the infrastructure needed to support their community. People were looking for change. They were looking for government that wasn't going to shy away from the big decisions that needed to be made, and they saw that in Labour, and today in the hall we saw that in Keir Starmer.
What sort of investment plans have you spoken about with the Leader's Office? Is there going to be any new money coming into your constituency?
Well, look, over time it's for Labour to make sure that we're investing in improving every single part of the country. I think that steely focus on how we can turn around our high streets with our plan to get high street business supported back is going to be crucial for local areas like mine, but also some of the measures Labour have announced to introduce more funding for GPs to get the NHS back on its feet over time is going to improve things in my communities too. There are a whole host of things that just aren't working for families locally at the moment, as you'll have seen when you're out and about during the elections too, and it's time we start putting those right.
How has the announcement on winter fuel gone down in your constituency? Have you heard from constituents at all about it?
Oh, definitely. Well, look, people, I think, understandably want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect the most vulnerable. So reassuring them that those on pension credit will still be eligible, the household support fund will be there for those who might black otherwise, and underlining our commitment to the triple lock as a way to improve pensions incomes over time has been so important. But they also want to know that those with the broader shoulders are going to be bearing their fair share of burden too. And that's the challenge we've set ourselves to the budget, and the challenge I know Rachel Reeves will be delivering in a few months' time.
What's the message that you got from that speech? How are you feeling now? Optimistic, hopeful?
Absolutely. I think very reassured that we've got a leader in Keir Starmer who gets the need to be steely, who gets the need to be bold, who's going to be honest with people about the challenges that we're facing, but who's not going to duck away from the difficult choices we need to make to finally start improving things for people. Whether it's getting the NHS back on its feet, getting GB Energy up and running, making sure that we've got control of our borders again. There's a huge face of structural challenges we need to tackle, and Keir showed in the hall today the resolve needed to do exactly that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alistair.
Great. So first of all, what were your reactions to that speech?
Actually, to be honest, I was quite emotional listening to the speech, partly because it's the first time in 14 years we've had a Labour Prime Minister doing a speech, but also, when's the last time you heard a Prime Minister in this country talking openly about facing down rioters, calling out racism for what it is? It's saying to people, if you want a controlled migration system, then that also means people will be successful in their asylum claims. If you want houses to be built in this country, then you have to accept that your community has to play its part. Talking about the important role of care workers and how they should have equal dignity in the workforce. Talking about those kids that don't go to university, and that's still a route for success, not just the ones that go to university. You've not heard a Prime Minister talk in those terms for a very, very long time. And I think it shows you that ultimately politics has changed. This is a different kind of government, and a government is determined to deliver for the people of this country.
Did you find it more optimistic in tone than we've seen Keir Starmer be since becoming Prime Minister?
Look, absolutely, and I think that's really important because we won for a purpose, it's changed for a purpose, and that purpose has to be to deliver a more positive and more hopeful future, of course, for Scotland, but for every part of the United Kingdom, and I think you heard that clearly from the Prime Minister today.
I mean, big news for Scotland, headquarters of GB Energy in Aberdeen. What do you make of that?
Look, great news for Scotland. Scotland will lead the way in the energy transition thanks to the actions of a Labour government. Aberdeen has been the beating heart of our energy industry for decades. It will continue now to be the beating heart of our energy sector for decades to come, with GB Energy headquartered there. But now let's get cracking with GB Energy set up, with the people's bills coming down, with more jobs being created, and investing in those supply chains and delivering that energy security for the future. Great news for Scotland, great news for Aberdeen, great news for businesses in Aberdeen, but most importantly for the people of Aberdeen.
I mean, how much is it fair to say that maybe behind that decision a little bit was the fact that Aberdeen North and South are SNP strongholds?
No, look, this is a decision that has been made about what is in the best interests of the energy sector that currently exists and the energy sector we have to transition to. And Aberdeen has always had a very strong case. It has, as I said, been the beating heart of the energy sector across the UK for decades, and it will continue to be that for the decades to come, and we can't wait to get started work.
I mean, in terms of that just transition, those jobs, you've got North Sea oil workers and then GB Energy's headquarters. It's an investment fund. Are you concerned about the just transition there?
Look, we have got to get this transition right, and you've already seen the consequences when governments make big promises and fail to deliver. For 14 years we've had the Tories who want to run away from the clean energy transition. For 17 years we've heard the SNP talk about the transition. Remember, Nicola Sturgeon promised the Saudi Arabia renewables, Alex Salmond promised the Saudi Arabia renewables, but instead what did we have? We had an industrial desert instead. Now with a UK Labour government, and I hope with a Scottish Labour government in 2026, we will get on with the work of delivering that just transition, creating the jobs of the future, highly paid, highly skilled jobs that brings down people's bills, creates more jobs into the future, and delivers energy security. As I say, great news for Scotland and great news for the people of Aberdeen.
Anna Sarwar, I believe you're in high demand today.
My
so
pleasure.
I will let
Thank you so much. Great to chat to you. Thank you.
Barry, big announcements in that speech just now from Keir on Hillsborough. What was your first reaction?
Look at the badge. I'm thrilled. Yeah. Look, it's been a long road, a very long road. And to have that as one of the centerpieces of the speech, there's a lot of people who have been fighting for this for so long. And I think that will really resonate.
We're in Liverpool.
Yeah,
we're in the. Is that sort of an expression of giving something back to Liverpool? It almost felt like the city had been left off the agenda. Actually, I would say for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's going to be enough actually to win back over Liverpool?
Well, look, it's what's needed. And I don't think anybody who has campaigned would just have anything else to say today, but thank goodness, at last. And yeah, I mean, it's just so long that people and families have been campaigning, and now to get the law signed, sealed and delivered almost by the Prime Minister, I think that's great.
Have you left that hall with a sense of hope, with a sense of optimism?
Look, I thought it was an important scene setting of the sort of country that Keir wants us to be. And that was a country of self-respect and where we respect each other. And I think that was really important. And it was the theme he seemed to keep coming back to, that sense of knowing who we are and being respectful of our fellow citizens. I thought, when he talked about his sister as a care worker, commanding exactly the same respect as she walked into a room as the Prime Minister, that's it. And, this is not Major's classless society by another name. This is really quite deep about how we see ourselves and therefore how confident we are in ourselves to be able to recognize the worth, the dignity of every other person in our society. And that's it's deep stuff, but it's good stuff.
Of course, this is overshadowed, perhaps, or there is an undercurrent, at least, of the winter fuel payments that have been taken away from many members of our society. Is that something that chimes with everything that you've just said?
Look, I think it was a mistake not to have released the impact assessment before the policy was announced. Now that we see the impact assessment that says of the 880,000 people who currently are not on pension credit, we think that only with all that the government is now trying to do, we think there will still be 780,000 without pension credit. I think that changes certainly my view of what the government's doing. If they could bring people on, cope with that 880,000, that makes sense. I understand why in times of economic austerity you need to try and have targeted means-tested benefits. As a principle, I'm in favour of universal benefits, but I understand why you could say, well, we need to try and target them more carefully. But I think there should be a taper. I think there should be a way of ensuring that those who are just over that threshold don't suffer that cliff edge. And that's the beauty of universal benefits. It's the problem with means-tested benefits, that there's a cliff edge. But I think it's actually quite serious that they've only recently, after all the announcement, said that their understanding is that there will still be more than 250,000 people in this country who could qualify for pension credit but won't.
But apart from that, it's very hopeful.
I think, look, shall I tell you something else that I really enjoyed in the speech?
Please.
And that was when he spoke about music and culture and the arts. And again, I thought that was very personal in the way he approached that. And it's great that we have a society which is so rich in the arts. Our music is the envy of the world. Our theatres are the envy of the world. We have an incredibly deep and rich cultural life that we should celebrate, that we should be proud of. And we need a government and a Prime Minister that values that and is going to support it. And I hope that message that he gave about the importance of it for who we are as a country will resonate deeply, and also make sure that some of the grand institutions that we do have continue to have the money that they need.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Barry. You're off to a fringe, aren't you now?
Yes, indeed.
You're off to. What are you speaking on?
I'm speaking on, I think we used to call it the Green Industrial Revolution.
Okay.
How was Barry?
It's interesting because both of those, Alistair and Barry, they're both talking about the hope and optimism projected by Keir Starmer's speech there, and Tracy Brabin, just before the two of them, was speaking about how the working class are back on the agenda. But all of this is overshadowed by removing the winter fuel payments. And of course the elephant in the room as well is the 2-child benefit cap that has not been lifted. These two things are grating against that vision of hope and optimism that Keir Starmer is hoping to project.
I mean, earlier I spoke to former Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, who was saying that this is a continuation of austerity and people need optimism, but for that to happen they have to reverse the winter fuel cuts and there needs to be investment, but as we were saying, Keir Starmer's defended those tough decisions, and the people we're chatting to here seem to have found that quite an optimistic speech.
Yes, I mean the hall is elated, but then of course it would be because we're in a hall full of delegates and Labour members, and there has been a changeover in the membership as of late. You won't find many Corbynites here anymore. This is a hall full of Starmerites, and as the new intake who've been elected, we've seen over the past couple of votes, they are whipped strongly, they are voting in line with Starmer, and they're prepared to go on to the broadcast round and defend him no matter what. I mean, over the case of winter fuel and the donation scandal, I think I've seen many sort of like gymnastics to bend over backwards to defend him.
There's a need they almost want, well, quite understandably, they want to celebrate that this is the first conference speech with a Labour Prime Minister in 14 years, and I think that's really what's coming through, is no matter what he's actually committed to in that speech, they're just happy that he's giving it as Prime Minister, and we didn't really see anything new in that speech. I mean, it was the Hillsborough Law, which was promised in their manifesto.
Do you think? I thought there was quite a bit.
Did you? What did you think was new?
Well, I thought the Hillsborough Law was a huge announcement that's going to be implemented before the end of April.
Yes.
And also that, we've already talked about how you knew Great British Energy was going to be in Aberdeen. I thought that was an exciting announcement.
It is an exciting announcement. But I guess a lot of it was affirmations or the next step in manifesto pledges.
I suppose I was surprised that there were even a couple of announcements, because every other speech we've heard from a cabinet minister, it's been a recycling of things that have been promised actually even since before the election. Angela Rayner's speech, the Deputy Prime Minister, she was talking about housing commitments, and the New Deal for workers still hasn't quite been fleshed out. The unions are actually in the dark about how this is going to play out. And this time last year I was in the same conference hall at the TUC Congress, which is the big meeting of all unions, they get together. And there hasn't really been much meat put on the bone of the New Deal for workers since then. Everyone is still sort of fingers crossed. But it was mentioned in Keir Starmer's speech, and he said that it would be the most ambitious rights or plan for rights that workers have seen in quite some time. He also renewed a pledge to the living wage.
Yes, yeah. Can you talk a bit more about that, because that was new?
Yes, it was. I mean, Labour have always sort of, it's kind of been rumbling in the background. There's always been this semi-commitment to bringing up the minimum wage to the living wage, which of course is higher. It's a few pounds higher per hour, and it deals with the tiers of minimum wage. If you are 18 and you work in a bar, you can be paid less than someone who is 25 and works in the same bar doing exactly the same job. The real living wage is there to tackle that sort of inequality. And that did feel like a commitment there, that he was going to bring everyone up in line, which is interesting because there are a number of businesses here who I'm sure would be rather disappointed to hear that.
And a couple gig economy businesses as well, who I'm also sure won't be happy about the New Deal for workers either.
Absolutely. Right, I'm happy with that. You happy?
With that too, yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll probably be back again tomorrow. Are we back again tomorrow?
Well, you're in Southport tomorrow.
I'm in Southport tomorrow.
And I'm in Liverpool tomorrow.
Great. Well, thanks everyone.